Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Dill Pickle Movie Network, and I am so excited to be kicking off my Oscars death race. Now, let's be honest. This Oscars death race has been going on for quite some time because the Oscars death race basically starts before you even know it's starting. Because watching movies throughout the year that just happen to get nominated at the end of the year is technically part of your Oscars viewing. Now, some people go back and revisit films, watch films again, but the Oscars death race is just such a fun time every year to kind of hone in on these specific films nominated for Oscars, because throughout the year we don't necessarily know which films are going to get nominated for Oscars or not. We usually have a good idea, but the Oscars death race is almost like a mission. It's why it's called a death race. It's why that term was coined, trying to narrow it down and see every single nominee. Now, I have never completed the Oscars death race, and this is the year that I'm going to say right now I'm going to complete it. I'm making that a manifestation. I'm manifesting it. I've already gotten pretty far, and these several videos that are going to come out over the next week are going to be kind of my way of kind of chronicling these different kind of achievements, these levels of the video game, you might say. The next level up each time I cross a bunch of these off the list. There are 53 nominees this year across all categories, and I'm talking not just the Best Picture nominees, but tech nominees, acting nominees, music nominees. There are some movies that are only nominated because of their songs. There are short films nominated. There's 15 short films. So that's what makes it so exciting every year as well, because it's not necessarily the big mainstream films you're used to seeing all the time that make the Oscars lineup in all these categories. So if you don't really know necessarily what the Oscars death race is, it is basically watching every single Oscar nominated film in a given year from every category. So I have a list of 53 films that are Oscar nominated, and my goal by the Oscars is to get through every single one of them. Now, I do a show on the channel called Picture This, where I go through each Best Picture nominee, and this episode is for the above the line category. So obviously 10 of these movies that I'm going to talk about today, I'm going to kind of breeze through because I'm going to go very in depth with my co-host Chadwick Webb on that show when we get to it in just a few weeks with those 10 nominees. But I did want to kind of spotlight in this particular episode the above the line categories. These are your picture nominees, your director, actor, actress, supporting actress, original screenplay, and adapted screenplay. They're kind of known as the big five, if you will. The picture, director, actor, actress, screenplay. If you get all five of those, that's the big five. Only 3 films have ever gotten that. It Happened One Night, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, and of course The Silence of the Lambs. But it's very interesting to see what categories there's some overlap for, what films miss out on certain categories, get in some other places. Now, I've been doing predictions videos all year, so I'm not going to really go through each category and what missed necessarily, but kind of talk about the nominations that each of these films has. So this episode will be devoted solely for the above the line films. And let's start it off by talking about these Best Picture nominees. Again, I'm not going to go too in depth just because I do have an episode of Picture This coming up very soon. Starting with American Fiction, though, I did want to just talk about its overall nominations. American Fiction, you could say, had a very successful showing compared to what some people maybe expected it to get, and that is picking up that supporting actor nomination for Sterling K. Brown and that Best Original Score nomination. It shows that this is a film that is not just on the general radar, but a film that is kind of reaching certain branches. It's reaching the actors branch, but it's also reaching the music branch, which for a film like American Fiction that is kind of shown in a very, I don't want to say basic because it's not a basic movie, but like in a less flashy format in terms of its visual stylings, you wouldn't think it would pick up any text, but it did pick up one tech nomination here for Best Original Score. American Fiction follows the story of an author played by Jeffrey Wright as he kind of learns to come to terms with his own blackness and what that means to him, and what it means in general cultural society, and what blackness means specifically in art, and how he's able to kind of observe that, and also kind of look at it in his own perspective with his own life. And you start to see this really compelling character study and family drama kind of coincide with the kind of more ridiculous, silly premise of this guy posing as this fake author to write this book to prove a point. It's one of those films that deals with comedy and drama simultaneously, and I will save a lot of my thoughts for when I talk about it on Picture This, but it is one of those movies that's just a general crowd pleaser, and it is the first of these picture nominations to cross off the list. But let's talk about the nominations that American Fiction has gotten. It has gotten a Best Picture nomination, Best Actor for Jeffrey Wright, Best Supporting Actor for Sterling K. Brown, Best Adapted Screenplay, and Best Original Score. Speaking of music, the next film we're going to talk about has a very central cover song that is very integral to its plot. It is Anatomy of a Fall. This is the Palme d'Or winner at Cannes, the Cannes Film Festival this past year. Anatomy of a Fall is about a woman whose husband takes a terrible fall and ends up dying, and the town is basically trying to get the answers of what happened to him. Was it suicide? Was he killed? Did she kill him? And that kind of becomes the inciting incident and the inciting premise of the movie. It is a courtroom drama, but because it's nominated Best Picture, you can probably imagine it's a very good one. And the way the courtroom drama is staged, especially because it takes place in a different country, so it's kind of a little different than what you might expect from your traditional US courtroom drama. I'm very excited to talk about this one with Chad. But Anatomy of a Fall really is a showcase of just a very solid, sturdy courtroom drama. And that's why it is probably a heavy favorite now to win Best Original Screenplay, but it is also why Best Actress for Sandra Hüller was a no-brainer, because she really is commanding this film, kind of getting this screenplay across in a very dignified way, which is so compelling because this is a long film and you really need to be able to watch someone just talk for 2.5 hours. And she's just so compelling as someone who is just trying to justify her case, but also has a bit of an edge to where you, the audience, kind of have to also question for yourself, did she actually do it or not? And the way she's able to convey that kind of tricky balance is really impressive. And of course, the big shocker of the day for some people was Justine Trier's Best Director nomination, because every year it's really nice to see a woman get into the Best Director category. Sometimes we've seen two get in, like in 2020 with Nomadland and Promising Young Woman. It's very rare, but we were looking like it could have been a case scenario where we didn't get any women in the Best Director category, but Justine Trier made it in over people like Celine Song for Past Lives or Greta Gerwig for Barbie. So this was a big surprise, but I think it's definitely a really cool surprise to see. And then film editing, again, because it is so centralized against this whole courtroom scene, you would think that editing isn't necessarily going to be an integral element, but it really is. And making this dialogue, making this film fly by in a time that feels faster than the actual runtime is. So the nominees, one more time to recap what Anatomy of a Fall has picked up. It has picked up a Best Director nomination for Justine Trier, Best Picture nomination, Best Actress for Sandra Hüller, Best Original Screenplay, and Best Film editing. Now, the next film, I just kind of brought it up when I was talking about Greta Gerwig. It is Barbie, which is a film I do not need to tell you about. I don't need to tell you what it's about. I don't even need to tell you my review, because there is a review out there for it, even though I have rewatched it since. So my thoughts are a little different than they were the first time I saw it when it was fresh off the Barbenheimer hype. But Barbie is really one of those really interesting films that is not just a crowd pleaser, not just a moneymaker, but has something very interesting to say, and is going to be something that is used to make a message, not just to entertain, not just to make us laugh, not just to provide really great musical numbers, which it also does. Barbie is turning into one of those technical juggernauts in terms of the contending categories where it's most likely to win. I would say costume design and production design are two that it is battling with one other film for, but it is strong in those categories. And of course, Best Original Song, it's going to pick up one. It's just a matter of which one. I still don't know. And this is not an Oscars predictors video. This is just me kind of checking off the list for the Oscars death race. So there will be elongated prediction videos when we get closer to the Oscars, where I will give my 2 cents as to what Barbie is going to win. There were some big snubs. Some people are a little disappointed that Greta Gerwig didn't get a Best Director nomination, that Margot Robbie didn't get a Best Actress nomination, but I do want to let everyone know they both still got nominated, just in different categories than what people were expecting. Margot Robbie got nominated for Best Picture, which in my opinion is even bigger than Best Actress, even though Best Actress is more of a singular recognition. I understand that, but she's nominated for Best Picture, so if the film wins, Margot Robbie's getting an Oscar. Same with director. She didn't get nominated, Greta Gerwig, for director, but she isn't adapted. She is nominated for adapted screenplay alongside her partner Noah Baumbach for the screenplay of this film. So they are nominated. They just aren't nominated in the respective categories that everyone was thinking they could get into. But we did see a Barbie pick up several nominations nonetheless. The nominees it picked up Best Picture, Best Supporting Actor for Ryan Gosling, who is hilarious, Best Supporting Actress for America Ferrera, who has that really great speech, Best Adapted Screenplay, Best Costume Design, Best Production Design, Best Original Score for Best Original Song song, sorry, for I'm Just Ken, and Best Original Song for What Was I Made For? A double song nominee. We don't see that a lot nowadays. It used to be a big thing in the 90s with the Disney Renaissance. They would just get songs after songs nominated from the same movie. But that rule has not really held over to future years. Speaking of holding over, let's talk about The Holdovers, which is one of the most delightful films of the year. This is another film I did a elongated review for. This is not me here reviewing these films necessarily as much as it is just me covering their place in the Oscars race. And I think this is a film that could be very sneaky in this Oscars race because it is that feel good, cozy film. It is not necessarily the biggest crowd pleaser of the year, but it is one of the films that is kind of, I don't want to say safe because that is kind of a demeaning term, but it's the one that is kind of I want to say safe because it's safest across the board in terms of like I don't know many people who don't like it. Where even the biggest, most revolutionary, amazing, beloved films of the year, some of them have their detractors. Where I don't really think there's many people who are detractors of The Holdovers, and I think it's because it has a really great core in its screenplay with its writing, which I think is a big contender to win that category. But it also has great performances that anchor it, that make it feel relatable about this guy who is stuck having to watch after these kids that are holding over for the Christmas vacation because their families can't pick them up. And then you also have Divine Joy Randolph's character as this person who is struggling herself with her own journey, but how that kind of ties into the other characters' journeys is really, really perplexing and really moving and really emotional. So I'm very, very much looking forward to seeing how The Holdovers holds over when we see Oscars time, because I really do like this film. As for what it is nominated for, The Holdovers is nominated for Best Picture, Best Actor for Paul Giamatti, Best Supporting Actress for Divine Joy Randolph, Best Original Screenplay, and Best Film Editing. Now, when we think of editing, we think of tightening things down, but that is certainly not the case for this next film, which is a very large, very long film, but it is still a very excellently edited film, which is Killers of the Flower Moon, Martin Scorsese's newest Western epic, if you will. I don't really think Martin Scorsese has done many westerns. He's done a lot of epics, but they've been kind of in different categories, like religious epics or crime epics. But this is kind of like a molding of everything, where it's got a lot of this like spirituality and this really interesting kind of thoughtfulness due to its subject matter of this, Native American indigenous tribe. But you've also got kind of the crime gangster element of these kind of underground workings, these guys who are trying to plan to overthrow it. Now, I know there's been a lot of criticisms with the perspective of the film. Should it be told by this person or that person? And I think those are very valid kind of conversations to have that the film itself has, which is what makes it so interesting. This is one that I think we're going to be talking a lot about in the years to come following the Oscars. It's going to be one of those films that is going to kind of carry on a legacy. But it got a lot of nominations here. It got a Best Picture nomination, Best Director for Martin Scorsese, Best Actress for Lily Gladstone, which would be a remarkable achievement there, and a very historic one at that. Best Supporting Actor for Robert De Niro, Best Cinematography, Best Film Editing, Best Costume Design, Best Production Design, Best Original Score, Best Original Song for Wajaje, A Song for My People. Speaking of technical juggernauts, one of the most brilliant-minded artists to ever grace any stage is Leonard Bernstein, and we're going to be talking next about Maestro, which is the biopic about Leonard Bernstein's life, but not necessarily about his career in music as much as it is about his family life, which is something that kind of sets it apart from one of the other types of biopics about a musician that you might see, or even films about music pop stars like a Bohemian Rhapsody. I don't mean to dunk on that film, but that's a very basic biopic, whereas this is anything but. It's lavish, it's gorgeous, and it has picked up some technical nominations because of that just beautiful artistry on display in terms of the way it is shot, the way it is executed, the sound, the makeup. This is one of those films that I think is not given a lot of credit where it should be given credit, because, behind the scenes stuff, some people think Bradley Cooper might be trying a bit too hard. But in my opinion, when you've been so close to an Oscar so many times and been nominated so many times and are just one of the most, fresh and exciting new voices as a director, because this is only his second film directing, I mean, why not swing for the fences? And you know what? If you have a really good swing, you show it off. I mean, Aaron Judge, every time he hit a home run, he was taking that victory lap and soaking in every moment. And I think that's just what Bradley Cooper is doing. So I don't blame him for trying as hard as he can for these Oscars, even if it can get annoying to some people. I appreciate it because honestly, I think a lot of us would hate to admit, but we're the same way. The nominees that Maestro got were Best Picture, Best Actor for Bradley Cooper, Best Actress for Carey Mulligan, Best Original Screenplay, Best Cinematography, Best Makeup and Hairstyling, and Best Sound. Moving on now to the biggest film of the year next to Barbie, it is Oppenheimer. And some would say this is even bigger than Barbie in the sense that this has been collecting so many precursors from so many different areas. This is another film I don't really need to talk in depth about, again, because all these films I'll be talking about on Picture This, but this one especially. I mean, Oppenheimer, you've probably seen it. If you haven't seen it, you definitely know the history. I mean, it's history. It is some of the most important history that you would find in any textbook. So let's just cut right to the chase and talk about what Oppenheimer's been nominated for, because it is the most of the night. It is Best Picture, Best Director for Christopher Nolan, Best Actor for Cillian Murphy, Best Supporting Actor for Robert Downey Jr., Best Supporting Actress for Emily Blunt, Best Adapted Screenplay, Best Cinematography, Best Film Editing, Best Costume Design, Best Production Design, Best Makeup and Hairstyling, Best Sound, and Best Original Score. That was a lot of nominations. Now let's go to a Best Picture nominee with only 2 nominations, but they are 2 very worthy ones, and that is Past Lives. This is a story, obviously, about a woman who is sent she's not sent, but she emigrates from Korea to Canada, and then when she grows up, she realizes that she is able to connect with someone she knew from her childhood, but she herself has kind of gone on in her own separate path, and you start to see how this kind of past, present, and future all kind of collide to create this giant kind of uh, a perplexing question, more so than dilemma, because it's not really like one of those dramatic, like, who am I going to choose type deals, as much as it is just kind of examining one's life at a stage in their life and trying to kind of reflect on where you are in your life personally in regards to the relationships around you and the memories that come with that baggage. I think it's a really interesting film. I can't wait to talk about it on Picture This, but it is only nominated for its writing and Best Picture, but it makes sense because the writing is really what shines here. I do think it could have picked up any matter of acting nominations. I mean, this has 3 very great central performances. It just happens to be this is a very, very, very stacked year for performances. Moving on now to Poor Things, which had a lot of nominations. This is a film, obviously, also about feminism, similar to Barbie, but this is more about sexual identity and kind of embracing one's. You know, strive to become an individual and not be sheltered and not be kind of put upon certain values based on other people around you, such as the men in Bella Baxter's life, kind of trying to force her to be one thing or objectifying her as one thing. You know, she learns how to break through that and kind of defeat those stigmas. And I think it's a really refreshing film to see nowadays. We're going to dive much deeper into Poor Things in Picture This, but I wanted to give kind of a blanket statement as to what the themes going on were in Poor Things, because I think the themes itself are even more exciting than the central premise, which is also very exciting, of this kind of Frankenstein mother baby hybrid type thing, which has been getting a little criticism out there for just its implications and what exactly it takes to get to that point and some of the questionable decisions there. But I think the overall message of what it has to say about, you know, a woman kind of owning her own body and her own spirit and kind of, you know, learning how to break through those barriers is really, really fascinating, especially in a year where Barbie is also on the table as this other very big marquee feminist piece. Poor Things was nominated for Best Picture, Best Director for Yorgos Lanthimos, Best Actress for Emma Stone, Best Supporting Actor for Mark Ruffalo, Best Adapted Screenplay, Best Cinematography, Best Film Editing, Best Costume Design, Best Production Design, Best Makeup and Hairstyling, and Best Original Score. Now, the last film nominated for Best Picture is one that I think earlier in the season we didn't know if it was necessarily going to be a big contender because it's very art housey, it's very obscure. But as the weeks went on with the PGA and the Golden Globe and the BAFTA, we knew this was going to be a nominee, and I'm so happy it is. And it is The Zone of Interest, which is a film. It is a Holocaust film. It is all about, however, the perspective of a Nazi family living over the gates of Auschwitz, over the fences, and you start to see how their mundanity and their everyday life and their comfortability juxtaposes with the horrors over the fence and the horrible things happening to Jewish people during this time. And the whole choice of not really showing much of that is what makes it so haunting and so scary and such a relevant and horrifying and oddly topical film nowadays as much as it was back then. I think this is a very, very great achievement. I expected it to get, honestly, a few more technical nominations. I expected it might get cinematography, production design, but it only picked up 5, but it was 5 big ones: Best Picture, Best Director for Jonathan Glazer, Best Adapted Screenplay, Best International Feature, obviously, and Best Sound. Now, I know I kind of breezed through those 10 just because I'm going to go in depth on Picture This about them. So I didn't want to go so far in depth in just giving my blanket thoughts on everything. because I want it to be a very nuanced discussion. But those are the 10 films, so we can cross those off our list. Everything in green, we have crossed off, we've watched them, we're excited, but there are still a few more above the line categories to hit on. Going next to Best Supporting Actress, where you will see The Color Purple nominated. This is the only nomination The Color Purple got. This tells the story of Celie, a woman who was kind of raised being a mother to her father's children. It's a very disgusting, very horrible thing, but she's able to break free to that only to end up in a household that is, if not equal to, or worse than the life she had before, because she is not only now in this horrible situation, but she's also separated from her sister. And you start to see, as she grows older, these kind of women around her that empower her, that give her a sense of confidence, a sense of owning a beauty, and recognizing beauty. And it's a remake of a film, a remake of a musical of a film that was a book. It's hard to find that lineage. It's hard to explain that lineage. But it is one of the great tellings of this story that I've seen. I've seen it on screen in the Steven Spielberg version. I've read the book. I've seen it on stage. The Cynthia Erivo Celie performance is obviously one of the best things I've ever seen. But this is a really, really strong adaptation. I think the acting is great across the board. Fantasia Barrino is amazing. And the supporting actress nomination it picks up for Danielle Brooks. If it's going to get one, I mean, I would have liked to see it maybe get Fantasia a nomination too. But the fact that Danielle Brooks is representing this film feels very right. If you're going to give one nomination, which you should give way more than one nomination to this film, but if you're going to give something, I think Danielle Brooks just kind of comes in, takes the film by the horns, and doesn't let it go until she gets out of the picture. But then she comes back into the picture and just, again, gives it that jolt of electricity, of lightning in a bottle energy that is so infectious and so powerful. This is the role that Oprah played in the original film. It's one of those films that I've really enjoyed, and I've rewatched it since, and I'm very happy to check it off the list. Another acting contender, we have Rustin, starring Coleman Domingo as the politician Rustin, who worked very closely with Martin Luther King Jr. He was obviously a big advocate for civil rights, but also gay rights, and being an openly gay man, an openly gay man politician, and an openly gay black man politician. I mean, there's a lot of adversity this man faced. I think the biopic itself doesn't necessarily serve the absolute magnitude of Rustin himself like I would have liked. I mean, the biopic is kind of basic in its display, in its structure, in its execution. But I think Coleman Domingo, who is the sole representative for this film in terms of nominations, is the sole representative of the greatness of this film. And I think even if you don't love the film, and I didn't love the film, I think this performance is worth raving about, worth telling your friends, worth cheering about, because it is that good. Moving on to the final of the best acting nominees, we have Naiad, which actually picked up 2 acting nominations, which was a little bit of a surprise. If you told me a month before nominations came out that either of these women would be nominated, I would have probably shook my head and been like, I don't think so. Not because they're not great, but just because they weren't really in the conversation. But then with every ongoing award ceremony, they became part of the conversation. That's Annette Bening and Jodie Foster, who are 2 veterans at this point, but are still delivering grade A work later in their careers, especially in a film like Naiad, which is about a woman who swam from Cuba to the Florida Keys. Now, if you don't understand that difference, watch this film and it will show you just how crazy of a feat that is, and how mind-blowingly impressive of a feat that is, and how dangerous of a feat that is. And then you take into account the fact that Diana Nyad was in her 60s or 70s when she did this. It's absolutely incredible how she's able to pull off what she pulls off. Now, I'm talking a lot about Naiad as the person because I think the actual real life story is a little bit more interesting than the film itself. Again, this is kind of a Rustin situation where I think the film itself is a little bit more basic in its presentation. This is the same directing team as Free Solo and The Rescue, and they very clearly have a knack of filming nature and filming these really dynamic sports on screen in documentary fashion. But I think in terms of the drama, I think it could have been a little bit stronger just in some of those conversations, some of those interactions. But I think the performances really sell it, especially Annette Bening, who I think isn't given enough credit here. She is performing her own stunts, essentially. She's swimming. And I know she's not swimming the entire distance, but when you have to take 2 three, four takes of the same scene over and over and over again. And the scene involves swimming. I mean, that's a lot of swimming to do on set at her age with that makeup. I just think it's a really impressive performance. And while it wouldn't have necessarily made my top five, I'm glad that the body of work is being represented because it is a very impressive performance. And it's a movie I don't love, but I definitely respect, especially for the true story behind it. So because The Color Purple, Rustin, and Naiad picked up some above the line nominations, let's cross them off the death race too. Now, there's one more film that picked up an above the line nomination that we have not talked about yet, and that is May December. May December did pick up a Best Original Screenplay nomination. I talked about this film when I did my New York Film Fest review. This was the first film I saw at New York Film Fest this year, and I absolutely adored it. I thought this was fantastic, showing this really problematic age gap and this really nuanced but terrifying relationship between an older woman who married one of her students. Or I don't know if she was a teacher or she was a substitute teacher. I can't remember completely, but she was a grown woman marrying a child, essentially marrying a middle schooler. And you start to see them, but not at the time where the scandal's taking place, but you see them years removed from the scandal as they've kind of grown into adults. But you see how this one boy, he's a boy, he's not a man, he's in a man's body, but he hasn't really done that maturing because he grew up in such an unconventional way and was basically poisoned and kind of grasped by these talons of toxicity. And I think it's a really powerful performance, especially from Charles Melton. And then you see Natalie Portman as this actress who has to come in and basically study this woman and her life and her kids and her relationships and her husband in order to play her in a movie. But you start to see how she kind of gets engulfed in this life and starts to see not only the empathy that comes from the people around, but also the horror in the fact that she sees the relatability that Julianne Moore's character, this very problematic woman, brings to this scenario. And you start to see her kind of slip into this kind of method actor-y type deal. I think it's a really cool character study about character study, which you don't see a lot of the time. I'm giving a full review for these because these are not Best Picture nominated, so I'm not going to get to talk about them on Picture This, which is an absolute travesty because I want to talk about these on Picture This because they're that good. Color Purple and May December. But May December was nominated for Best Original Screenplay, which seems like if you're going to nominate it for something, I mean, the script is just so good. But the direction's great too. The performances, I mean, Natalie Portman delivers a one-take monologue straight to the screen that is just it's so good. So that is the final above the line category nomination we have to talk about. So let's knock May December off the list, or not knock it off the list, but let's highlight it in green. So there we go. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 films out of 53 that we have been able to cross off the list for this Oscars death race. We still have plenty of films to go, but those are the above the line categories. Now that we have finished talking about all the above the line categories, I actually wanted to give you my personal rankings for these different categories and how I would rank them in most deserving to least deserving, and how much I want to see them win this award. I'm not going to rank the Best Picture nominees because that's something I do on Picture This, so I want to save that ranking for then. But going to Best Director, how I would want to rank these directing nominees. Obviously, I'm a Nolan boy all the way, but I think this is an even better film than I could have ever imagined him making. So I'm definitely putting Christopher Nolan at number one for my Best Director slot. Number two, I'm going to put Yorgos Lanthimos. I think what he brings to Poor Things visually, aesthetically, I mean, just what he does in the just overall vision of the film is just so impactful. And number three, I'm putting Jonathan Glazer for The Zone of Interest. I just think it's one of those so gripping and thrilling, but also very haunting and tragic and terrifying films that I think is all due to Jonathan Glazer's vision and his overall outlook on the subject matter and on the design mechanics in general and how to construct this to be the best it can be. At number four, I'm going to put Martin Scorsese. I think this is a really strong film of his. I think he's really, one of the greatest directors ever working, so it's no surprise. It's not my favorite film of his, but it is a great film nonetheless. And number five, I'm putting Justine Triet for Anatomy of a Fall. I need to rewatch Anatomy of a Fall to get a true sense of whether I really love it or just merely like it. But I think Justine Triet's direction is really good. This is just a really good directing category. As for who I think is going to win, well, you'll have to wait and see because I'm going to be putting out a predictions video the day before the Oscars, so stay tuned for another week for that video. As for Best Actor, I think Cillian Murphy kind of goes hand in hand with Oppenheimer. I think he gives the best performance of the year across any category, any gender, any lead, supporting, whatever. I think Cillian Murphy's performance in Oppenheimer really just commands that film and grounds that film and makes that film as strong as it is, if not stronger. I mean, I really couldn't imagine that film without Cillian Murphy at the core. But I also put Paul Giamatti at number two for the holdovers because he is just so delightful, so pleasant, so amazing in that role. Number three, I'm putting Jeffrey Wright for American Fiction. I think it's just one of those really great comedic performances, but also has a lot of great nuanced drama in there. At number four, Bradley Cooper. He's doing a lot in Maestro, but he's doing a lot of good in Maestro, and those scenes of him conducting are just so amazing and mesmerizing to watch. At number five, Coleman Domingo. I think it's more of a reflection on the film. I wish he had a better film to work with, but he is the best part of that film. And I think he's also great in The Color Purple. If he were to get nominated there, I'd also put him pretty high. But he's only fifth because the four actors above him are that strong. For Best Actress, right now, I would say Emma Stone is the one I like the best in terms of performance. I think she is just doing the most. But I also think, you don't have to necessarily do the most to have the best performance. But luckily, she finds those softer, more reflective moments in her performance that I think do carry it above that threshold. And number two, I'm going to put Sandra Hüller for The Anatomy of a Fall. I think she's just exceptional in there and just delivers some of the most crushing, but amazing work of any actor this year. At number three, Lily Gladstone, Killers of the Flower Moon. I love her in that movie. I think she would be a great representative for this category, for this film. Considering I don't think Killers of the Flower Moon is going to win a lot, I would love to see her get up there. I think in terms of who I would like to see win the most, I honestly probably put Lily Gladstone at number one because I want to see her win the most. But in terms of the performances, she is here at number three. At number four, I'll put Carey Mulligan for Maestro. I've seen her in better, but I think she is still amazing in this. I think the scenes, especially when they're older, when it's not black and white, it's more color, and she's dealing with her diagnosis of her illness. I think that is when she provides the best work of maybe her whole career in those scenes. Number five, I'm putting Annette Bening. Again, like I said, I praise the feat she took in terms of getting this in her body and swimming on set and being her own stunt woman. It's just this was also a very stacked category, so I'm not going to put her any higher. As for supporting actor, this is actually a bit different than most people would have it, but I would put Robert De Niro at number one. I think this is probably his best performance since, I don't know, maybe the 90s, Goodfellas, Casino. I don't know. But this is one of my favorite Robert De Niro performances. I think it's really, really hauntingly good. At number two, I'm putting Robert Downey Jr., though. He's probably the odds on favorite to win. He definitely is the odds on favorite to win. I shouldn't say probably. But he's great in Oppenheimer. He's a great foil. He's the Salieri to Oppenheimer's Mozart, if you will. If you've seen Amadeus, you know what I'm talking about. At number three, I'm putting Mark Ruffalo for Poor Things. What he's doing in that film is just so above and beyond and so just flashy and fun and kooky and crazy. At number four, I'm putting Ryan Gosling, also a very out there kind of kooky, crazy performance. Definitely one of the most unique performances of his career. I'm not as high on his performance as others are, but I still think he's great in it. And number five, Sterling K. Brown for American Fiction. I honestly thought Jeffrey Wright was far and above the highlight of that film, but seeing Sterling K. Brown nominated for anything is still a delight, regardless of whether or not he is number one, two, three, four, or five in this category. I'm just happy he's getting the nomination here. As for supporting actress, Divine Joy Randolph is the favorite to win. She's my favorite in the category. She's exceptional. Number two, I'd put Danielle Brooks. I think she just gives such a stunning performance, and I'm shocked the movie itself doesn't have more. At number three, I'm putting Emily Blunt for Oppenheimer. I don't think she's the best part of the movie, but this is one of her better performances, and I think she is a really great emotional core to this film that it sometimes needs in the right moments. Number four, America Ferrera for Barbie. I think she's really great. Some people think the speech is a little hammy, a little over the top, but I think she delivers it really well. And number five, Jodie Foster for Nyad. Again, this is not a knock on her performance as much as it is just a praise of the performances above her. But I think Jodie Foster, I'm expecting a type of performance like this from Jodie Foster, even though it's a great performance. Like, it's not necessarily a surprising performance, but it is still a very good performance. Moving on to Best Original Screenplay. At number one, I will put May December. I mean, I really like this screenplay so much, and I'm shocked that it didn't get more nominations. And considering that it's only nominated for screenplay and it's my number one, yeah, you can imagine how much my blood was boiling when I didn't see it get nominated for anything else. But at number two is The Holdovers, a very close second. I mean, these are probably my two favorite screenplays, period, throughout the year. Number three, though, I'm going to put Past Lives, a really gorgeous screenplay, really reflective, really meaningful, just a lot to ponder, really a lot to think about. Number four, Anatomy of a Fall, same thing, a lot to think about. Some of it may seem a little bit basic in its courtroom structure. We've seen this before, but I think there's just enough of a twist to make it refreshing and new. Maestro is number five, just because I don't think the writing is necessarily the highlight of that film, but I still think the writing's pretty good, just not as strong as the four above it. As for adapted screenplay, I actually struggled with picking what my favorite was, but I think just because of how sophisticated at times, but how fun it is to play with the language, I'm going to put Poor Things at number one for adapted. I think the language here is used in such an interesting way. At number two, though, very close is Oppenheimer, because I think Oppenheimer just moves so well, and part of that is due to its really great, smart, crisp, quick dialogue. But I do think Poor Things just has that edge due to just kind of the whimsical nature of its screenplay and its dialogue. At number three, though, is going to be American Fiction. I think that it might be the favorite to win right now as I'm recording this, just because I think it's also just so clever, so quick, so smart. And number four is Barbie, though. The writing is not anything to shy away from. I mean, it is a really in your face, but really importantly so, screenplay. I think it really gets its message across well, even if it is a little matter of fact. I think it's still very clever in how it handles the IP and its construction. Even though I think the overall artistic vision visually is more impressive than it is on paper, I still think it's a worthy nomination. And who wouldn't love to see Greta Gerwig and Noah Baumbach go up and accept this award for it? I would definitely be happy to see that. And then at number five, I'm going to put The Zone of Interest, only because when I think of that movie, I think more about the concept and the actual visual orchestration of the different technical elements than I do the screenplay. But regardless, it's a really good premise and a really good set of dialogue, because you need to make these characters as haunting as they are. So those are my breakdowns of the above the line categories. Those are all the films I'm checking off for the death race, the Oscars death race. I'm so excited to get to the next crop of films, which will likely be something along the lines of best score and song, because I'm about to finish those up. So I'm probably going to give my score and song thoughts in a quick video in the next coming days. And then, we're going to dive into the animated films, the documentaries, the internationals, the techs, and of course the shorts. I can't wait for the shorts. It's always so fun discovering the shorts, because there's really no kind of hype around them until Oscars come out. So it's really exciting to get to watch those. But that's the Oscars death race, part one of six, I believe, talking about the above the line category. So if you want to stay around for more, make sure to like and subscribe. Specifically subscribe, hit that bell so you can be notified for when the next video comes out. There's going to be a lot of videos coming out this week as we head into Oscar season, including my own personal Oscars, my Pickle Awards, where I'm going to be awarding my favorite films, performances, designers, etc., of the year. So if you want to be part of that action, if you want to see all that go down, if you want to keep up with my Oscars death race, check me out on Letterboxd, because it's all there. But also check me out here, and make sure to subscribe and like and ring that bell. It's going to help you and help me. Help me, help you, help me, help you, help me. I don't know. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time here on the Dill Pickle Movie Network.